think there's a lot of people that could apologize, but apologies work both ways.
What chances do you reckon, Meghan, of doing that?
Very slim to none. Let's go with that. Slim to none at this point.
Probably
unless
right
the
there,
money runs
Victoria.
out.
All right, well, the rift in the royal family is once again in the spotlight with Prince Harry.
When the interviewer pressed to find out who that was, he said he was not prepared to share at this point.
Okay, so here's the gossip. Harry sat with BBC in May 2025 and everyone thought it was a boring chat, but then he confessed the only way to get security was by keeping their royal role, and he admitted he and Meghan wanted to stay but were stopped, and now the shocking part. They told the world they chose freedom and independence, but actually it looks like they never really had a choice. Okay, so listen, this is where the drama really blows up because Netflix did not throw $100+ million at just anybody. They wanted the story of two royals who bravely left the biggest monarchy for love and freedom, and Netflix bosses even hyped them up as authentic and inspiring, but now Harry himself admitted they never really chose to leave, they were forced out, which means the whole fairy tale that sold the deal was fake. And instead of brave leaders, Netflix actually got two people who got pushed out and then tried to spin it as some noble sacrifice. And if you think about it, every single show and documentary they made under this deal was built on that false story. So here is where it gets even juicier, because if Harry and Meghan were actually pushed out and not leaving by choice, then every single story they sold to Netflix and to the public is now shady, since Netflix was not just buying random content, they were buying the authenticity, the fairy tale, the brave decision, and Harry shattered it all with those 6 little words, "We wish to carry on," but was stopped. And now people are whispering maybe Netflix paid millions for a story that was never true, and that could even crash their whole deal. And to really see how bad this looks, we have to rewind back to 2020 when Harry and Meghan first shocked the world on Instagram with that polished announcement where they made it sound like after months of reflection they had chosen to step back carefully, worded to show they were in control, presenting themselves as heroes, making a brave choice, when in reality it seems they were just covering up the fact that they got pushed out. And now it gets even spicier, because back in 2020, Harry and Meghan painted this perfect picture saying they wanted to step back a little, become financially independent, still support the Queen, and basically reimagine their role. So it looked like evolution, not exile. And that spin was super important when they went knocking on Hollywood's door months later, because Netflix saw two brave royals giving up privilege and power for something better, not bitter. Ex-royals with grudges, and their official pitch was all about hope and inspiration, and Netflix totally bought it, hyping them as authentic leaders who chose a harder path. But now with Harry admitting they actually wanted to stay and were stopped, the whole thing flips upside down. Every line of that polished statement, every word Netflix praised was built on the idea of choice, and if that was a lie, then their entire brand becomes fake. And Netflix didn't buy visionaries at all. They bought two people spinning their rejection into a fairy tale. And here is where the whole thing totally blows up, because when you line up Harry's 2025 BBC confession with all their past statements, the contradictions scream loud and clear. Like in 2020, they said over and over that they chose to step back, chose independence, chose a new role. Then in the Oprah chat, Harry claimed his family cut him off, but still framed it as a result of their brave choice. And then in the Netflix doc, he suddenly slips and says they never planned a royal exit and were forced into it. Like, excuse me, forced is the complete opposite of chosen. So this is not just a tiny change in story, this is full-on dishonesty. And if the foundation of their empire is fake, then we are talking about $100 million lie that could bring everything crashing down. And now the real twist comes out, because even in their own Netflix doc, they could not stick to one story. Meghan saying she felt unprotected, Harry saying everything that happened was always going to happen, like they were trying to say they chose to leave, but also hinting they had no choice. And then fast forward to May 2025, Harry drops the biggest bomb ever, saying security was tied to their role and that both he and Meghan wished to carry on but were stopped, which means straight up they did not leave by choice, they were blocked from staying by the same royal family they've been saying for years they walked away from. And that is not just a small slip, it is a total rewrite of history, exposing their whole Netflix empire, every interview, every sob story, every victim narrative as fake, because the foundation explanation was always that they chose to step back when really they never had a choice at all. And here's where the drama totally flips, because if Harry and Meghan really wanted to stay but got pushed out, then this was never about making a brave choice. It was about being fired and then spinning the firing into some noble story, and the timeline shows it clear as day. First in 2020, they said we chose to leave, then by 2022, they were saying we were forced into it, and now in 2025, Harry says we were stopped from carrying on, every year moving further from responsibility and deeper into victimhood. And the wild part is Netflix signed them right at the start, in 2020, when the whole brand was still about voluntary sacrifice and freedom, so Netflix thought they were paying for inspirational leaders, when really they got two people who were basically let go, and then spent years dressing it up as destiny, which is not inspirational at all. It's embarrassing. And if that isn't enough, now Harry is blaming everything on security, saying their safety was tied to their official role and that's why they couldn't stay, which totally exposes why they've been clinging so hard to titles and status this whole time, because their exit wasn't about vision or principles or uplifting stories. It was about not getting the security deal they wanted, and that makes the entire Netflix empire look like a giant scam. And this is the part that wrecks their whole Netflix image, because Harry using security as the excuse blows up every story they ever told about wanting privacy or craving a normal life. Like, if security was really the big reason, then why sign a flashy $100 million Netflix deal that shoved them back into the spotlight even more than before? You can't say public life was too dangerous and then willingly film your private family moments for millions of viewers. And it gets darker too, because Harry is basically admitting they expected taxpayer-funded security even after stepping back from duties, wanting the perks and protection without the responsibility, and when the royals said no, they bailed and turned it into a sob story. So instead of brave sacrifices, Netflix may have bought into a lifestyle cover-up where the real motive was keeping their luxury and safety intact, not telling uplifting stories. And here's the kicker: while Harry was spilling all this in the BBC interview, Meghan, the Queen of Microphones, stayed totally silent, not a word from her about this bombshell, which makes the whole thing even more suspicious. And honestly, Meghan staying quiet right now might be her smartest move ever, because for 5 years, she has been the one driving their whole victim story, sitting with Oprah crying about racism, telling the world she was suicidal and unprotected, selling the image of a strong woman escaping the palace cage. But Harry just blew that up on BBC by saying they actually wanted to stay but were stopped, and that makes her version of bravely choosing freedom look fake. You cannot be both someone who chose to leave for mental health and someone who got kicked out over security deals. So instead of jumping in, Meghan has gone totally silent, letting Harry take the fall, which feels super calculated, because if she confirms him, she ruins her own narrative. If she denies him, she exposes cracks in their marriage brand. So she says nothing and leaves everyone guessing. But that silence says a lot, because if these two can't even agree on their basic origin story, how are they supposed to create authentic content together? And while Harry is tripping over his own words, the royals are doing the opposite. King Charles still showing up for state duties, Catherine pushing childhood projects, William talking homelessness and climate while the palace keeps doing its job. No press conferences, no drama, just steady work, and that contrast is brutal. Harry whining about being stopped from serving while the rest of them quietly prove what service actually looks like, and that silent dignity makes the Sussex circus look even messier. And wow, this is where it just gets embarrassing for Netflix, because imagine paying out $100 million for two people who can't stop obsessing over the job they left, while the royals who stayed never even mentioned them. The palace doesn't need to clap back because their work speaks louder. King Charles, William, and Kate keep showing up and serving while Harry keeps whining about what he isn't doing, and that makes the Sussex story look empty, because if the monarchy was really as cruel and racist as they painted it, then why is it running just fine without them? No gaps, no collapse, nothing. And that should make Netflix wonder why they invested in people who spend more time dragging their old employer than creating anything fresh. And the funniest part is the royal silence is actually the smartest strategy, because the second they respond, they give Harry and Meghan relevance, so they just ignore and keep working. And meanwhile, the second Harry's BBC bomb aired, social media went savage. The sympathy was gone, and people started posting receipts side by side comparing the 2020 chosen narrative to the 2025, stopped from carrying online and calling it out as flat out lies. The hashtag pick a story started trending, and the internet basically roasted them for contradicting themselves non-stop. And now the chaos hits another level, because it's not just regular people calling out their lies, even celebs and industry voices are piling on. Piers Morgan came out swinging, saying he always knew Meghan's story was fishy, and now it's proven, while Hollywood insiders whispered that Netflix was tricked into backing what one exec called professional victims who can't keep their story story straight, and that's poison in an industry that lives off authentic stories and good PR, which couldn't come at a worse time since Meghan's With Love show is flopping, her lifestyle brand is stuck in legal mess, and Harry just threw gasoline on the fire, making their whole image collapse, even their most loyal fan base. The Sussex squad has gone unusually quiet, and that silence says it all. And with their money burning fast from a mansion staff and private security while their income streams crumble, Spotify gone Netflix, likely pulling out, and publishers backing away. People are starting to wonder if this is the beginning of the end for the Sussex brand, and instead of planning a comeback, it looks like they're running out of moves fast. And this is where the mask fully slips, because the guy who spent years branding himself as the prince who chose freedom is now admitting he never even wanted it in the first place. And that makes their whole Netflix deal look like a scam, since the company thought they were funding a story of sacrifice and vision, not two people scrambling to pay for their mansion and security. Meghan's silence suddenly makes sense too, because if she backs Harry, she wrecks her own carefully built narrative, and if she denies him, she exposes their brand marriage, so she just stays quiet while he takes the heat. But for Netflix, this should be the last straw, because no brand can survive on shifting stories. You can't keep telling the world we chose to leave, then we were forced, then we never wanted to leave at all, and still expect people to trust you, because once trust is gone, it never comes back. And 5 years later, that's all the Sussex brand really is, not a story of inspiration, but a story of confusion and contradiction. And the saddest part is Hollywood doesn't see brave truth tellers anymore. They see two ex-royals who lost their jobs and have been desperately trying to spin it ever since. Now it's crystal clear the whole thing was smoke and mirrors. Netflix thought they were buying into a story of sacrifice and strength, but what they really got was two people twisting their tail. Whenever it suited them, they told the world they wanted privacy, but then sold every private detail to cameras. They claimed authenticity, but every new interview exposed fresh contradictions. They talked about creative freedom, but all they delivered were vanity projects nobody truly cared about. And while they were stuck in this endless cycle of whining and rebranding the royal family they painted as cruel, just kept doing their jobs serving the public, showing up with dignity, and proving what real duty actually looks like. The monarchy didn't collapse without Harry and Meghan. In fact, it thrived stronger than before, and that makes the Sussex brand look weaker, emptier, and more embarrassing, because they had every single chance to create something meaningful. They had global attention, millions of dollars, and endless goodwill, yet they chose to waste it by turning every stage into a pity party and every platform into a megaphone for their grievances. And now after this BBC disaster, no serious company will risk investing in them again, because who trusts people who can't even keep their own life story straight? The real question now isn't just whether their empire is cracking, it's whether there was ever anything solid there to begin with, and if not, then maybe what we're watching isn't the fall of a brand, but the slow realization that Harry and Meghan never had one in the first place. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want the real inside scoop on all the royal drama without the media spin, then make sure to subscribe to Jacob Reports, hit the bell icon so you never miss an update, and drop your thoughts in the comments, because here you'll always get the unfiltered truth first.